Welcome back to Shabby Shack Studio, friends, and Merry Christmas to you and yours. As you can guess, we are actually going to be celebrating all things Christmas. This is actually a really jam-packed video, so I have skipped through a bit with editing and because there is actually just so many kind of parts to this video. So I will list that below in break down the chapters for you, if that helps you. But let's jump in. Lit a candle, as always. It's one of my favorite Christmas candles. I've grabbed my favorite supplies. Now this one is a really good one for everyone from beginners to expert. You can get as particular as you like, or you can start with really basic tools and go from there. Okay, so I've just grabbed one of my favorite pencils which has a really light lead. I don't recommend anything heavy or it's going to show through your paints, your watercolors, and even it can damage the paper below. So we don't want to do that. Get something light and keep a nice light hand. I have used, and this is a little bit different, I have actually used a heavy drawing paper. It's a 225 GSM and I'm actually painting directly on that. Now I know it's not watercolor and we're using watercolors, but bear with me a moment. I actually did this last year because we moved house and I just couldn't find all my supplies and I desperately wanted to send some Christmas cards off to family, and with all the moving and boxing and stress and all the things that moving house entail, which are just super stressful, I needed, just for my soul, for my heart and soul, to sit down and lose myself in my favorite watercolors and my creative practice. So I managed to unearth some of this heavy drawing paper at the time, and I thought, you know what, if I hate it, I can throw it out, which is a really great attitude to have when you start creating. Sometimes if you're using inexpensive products, and we are definitely about beginners and inexpensive products here in the studio, it gives you a little bit more creative license to be kind to yourself. That it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. It's not the end of the world if you hate what you've created. You can throw it away and it hasn't cost you so much money in order to make it. So this paper is great because it's A5. So it is the perfect size for a gift card or a Christmas card. So as you can see, the paints don't move quite the same, so I had to kind of work into the wet on wet, and then I do come back and forth, and you'll see me painting pine cones, Christmas baubles, and a Christmas wreath card. So you're actually getting 3 for 1 today, and we're putting it together. So it's going to be super fun. Make sure you have a drink. Of course you can pause, but make sure you have a drink and all your tools pretty handy, and lots of extras in case there's something you don't like. Don't stress too much about your sketches. As you can see, they're really basic. I've actually never drawn a pine cone before now. So I also don't have time to, just a crazy schedule. I'm a textile designer. I'm a mum, I'm an artist, I do a lot of things, and this part of my creative outlet that I share with you guys here on YouTube is just another part of what I do. So I don't have time to actually create anything that you ever see on my channel. I have not created it beforehand and then shown you kind of the good copy. I've actually created it with you live, with errors, fixing things up, the whole shebang. So don't be too worried about, and everything comes from my imagination. I don't use images I copy. I rarely have anything in like flowers or anything that I have in front of me that I can copy. It all comes from my mind. So the pine cones that you can see are just 100% me just thinking about what a pine cone looks like. I have some in jars around the house and I did not even think to go and grab them. It's just not my creative process. If it's yours, by all means, grab some pine cones. So if you want to use something to look at, go nuts. I always put on music or a favorite movie, and that's so I can lose myself in the process and I'm not actively overthinking my creative process. I really recommend, even if that's not how you generally do it, I do recommend you give it a go. You may find you love it as much as me. So anyway, I've done some loose sketches, different sizes of the pine cones, as you can see. I skip back and forth. You can see me go back as the colours are drying, and of course they become more muted as they dry, and adding a bit more depth, a bit more moodiness, or even just smoothing lines out as you go. Remembering this is not watercolour paper, so your paints don't play as nice as they do on watercolour paper. Sometimes the edges don't bleed and bloom quite as nice, although the paint stayed really where I put it. It was pretty well behaved, and I was really quite surprised during the process. I found it a little bit difficult because it's out of my comfort zone and the paint wasn't moving how I normally wanted it to. But when I kind of just thought, you know what, I did that on purpose because I want creating to be available to everybody, and a lot of people can't afford the additional supplies. They've got some nice paper they've picked up at a local craft store that's inexpensive. I want you to realize that you can use that as well, and this paper has actually got a nice thickness. So whereas watercolor paper quite often is a bit thinner unless you've got the really expensive stuff, and again that kind of defeats the purpose. This is a Christmas card. This is not meant to be something that we're necessarily hanging on our wall. So inexpensive is great. So you can see my process is very loose. I'm just dotting it in there, kind of thinking about how space would sit, or if there would be kind of snow on the pine cones or whatever. I've kept it really quite simple. I guess you could go back and add something with the white, but I rarely use the white in my watercolors, and I don't go back and add white paint normally on anything I create. So again, if that's your way, go mad. I normally just keep that negative space in mind as I create. Do keep in mind, I'm not going to go too deep into the products I use, especially on this video, because I've actually edited this one down to around 25 minutes. So there's a fair bit to kind of talk you through, and then I do kind of like to have a little bit of background music in there and just shush and let you enjoy that along the way as well. So you will see me do the pine cones. Next up I'll do the leaves, and then I will do the baubles. Now leaves can be whatever you like to paint. Because we're here in Australia, I've made mine gum leaves because I just think that they would feel really nice in a wreath and they feel like home. We don't generally have the snow here, and we don't necessarily have the same foliage as you guys do in America and in Europe. So I'm going to turn those leaves into a cute little wreath, and the baubles and the pine cones are going to stand alone on a card each. I'm sure you've noticed me wetting that colour palette that I have there on the left. Now these colours were actually used in my own Christmas tree watercolour that is actually doing really well online. Thank you so much, guys. It's been so nice to see the extra followers and the support. It's really made this girl have a little happy dance. So you will notice that those colours are drying, and you can see me wetting them down as I move from the browns and the pine cones to the greens and the leaves. I have used the same colours. Again, I will link all that for you below to save me talking too much. And then I even use the same colours in the baubles. So I've kept that theme really quite basic and simple. I actually found the baubles the hardest to paint because there's just so much area of the same colour. So I do recommend, if you're using drawing paper, not watercolour paper, to get a fair bit of water on that brush to mix those colours through. Again, I found them difficult, but at the end I actually really loved how the paint dried, and they kind of look like they caught the light like they would on a tree in all different ways. So if there was a light on the tree or the sun streaming through the window, I liked how it had that kind of splotchy, uneven finish. So for me, those imperfections are part of what I love when I create. The idea for these cards was something that's kind of been in my mind for a little while. I've been thinking about doing them with florals, in fact. So I wasn't sure if this was going to come together quite like I pictured, and yet I'm really happy with how the colours came out, how the paint's sitting on the paper, and then just cutting them out really basically, as you can see, and then layering them together. And I really like that kind of white border, and it's really quite simple. So this is just me kind of planning it out. Again, did not plan this beforehand. You are seeing the entire process right before your eyes. I literally kind of did it as I went, thought about how maybe when I did the baubles, different sizes, etc. And then how I might actually put the card together. So at this stage, it's still as much a surprise for me as it is for you. Again, I just grabbed a piece of that A5 card, so you could purchase it as an A5 card, or you could purchase it as a larger card and cut it down, whichever you feel most comfortable with. So all I did was crease that edge nice and tight, and then laid it out so it was straight, so you can see, to position my little baubles. So I've started with this one. I actually grabbed this punch that I have, which I just love. It's called a Crop-a-Dile too. I use this when I create my journals and things as well, because the punches are terrific. It also has an eyelet section on it as well, and you can see that blue button at the top. You just slide that back and forth for different things. So it's got two different punch hole sizes. I chose the small one for this. Again, this is something I just decided on the fly. So I have edited out of the video me getting up and down and grabbing things from all over my studio. Because that would be boring for you, but that's actually what happened. I kind of started thinking about the idea and then thought, hey, I could punch a hole in them and put some jute through there. So I did grab that red and white ribbon you can see in the top right corner, and that was my first thought for this card. But then I decided, you know what, I love the rustic jute. So if you're doing the same as me, I grabbed a ruler and I've just measured 2 centimeters from the top of the crease. So when you saw me do that, and then I just grabbed some narrow double-sided tape. That's actually on the back, so I flipped that over before I marked that and did that. You'll see anyway as I put it together. And then literally just sticking that bit of jute on and turning the card over where the pictures are actually going to be, so the little baubles are going to be. And then flipping it back over the other side, and if I can get them to behave for a second, that's okay. It's a little bit fiddly, but they get stuck down in a minute, so no worries. And then just pulling that little bit of double-sided tape off, so the other side, and then sticking that one around. And because that, it is a narrow tape, but it's just wide enough for me to wrap the twine around twice, which I kind of liked. I just like the look. You could do it once if that's what you want to do, or if you want to use a ribbon. Anyway, just securing that back in place at the back and giving that a cut and pressing that down. It actually stuck really nice and securely. So I expect that will be nice when it arrives to my loves, to my relatives, and all my friends. I want to wish a Merry Christmas. So these actually will be going out to my family. So again, didn't do anything in advance, and I did it on the fly, and then everything in my studio seems to have a second purpose. So these are actually going to go out to my family. Okay, so I just grabbed a couple of strips, as you can see, popped those on the back. I do find these little narrow double-sided tape is easier to kind of handle than the thicker one, but again, it's whatever you can find at your local craft store or your discount store. So you can see that I've just popped those on. This is the last bauble. I skipped the red one because I wanted to make the video not too long so that it wouldn't become quite tedious and boring. So that's just sticking those in place for you to show you the card. Now, when I did the bauble with the stripe, I did actually plan on, I was thinking about maybe adding a colour, but then I remembered I had these little rhinestones and these little pearls in a cupboard. So I decided that I would pull them out and make a detail with that. Now that's something you can do or choose not to do. Again, it's totally up to you, but for me, I just another level of fun, and I thought that this would be nice to receive with the cord and kind of a little bit interactive and a little bit fun, and it just certainly puts me in the Christmas mood, and I get to enjoy I love this season, so it helps me enjoy the season a little more, creating these cards. So there you have it. That's our Christmas bauble Christmas card, and I hope that you really enjoyed making it and you made it yours. The pine cone one has the same setup with the double-sided tape on the back and the twine wrapped around like that. So just keep that one in mind when we get to that one. And then I added a little jute tie, so it was a nice way to tie all the cards together and keep the theme, have a similar feel. The wreath was a little more complicated, but other than keeping in mind that the leaves needed to not be too large because we're using a folded A5 card, I didn't draw them because I didn't pre-plan it. Like I've said, I only drew them with that in mind, and then I just played with the leaves and to see what would fit where before I stuck them down, and then finally added that little jute tie. So this was a really fun process, just thinking about how the wreath would come together. And I was quite surprised how much I loved how they overlapped and sat next to each other nicely. So I'm looking forward to doubling up on all these cards to send to my family and friends this season. So before we go, I do want to say thank you again for taking me into your heart and into your home. I hope that you have a very Merry Christmas with your loves, with the people that are important in your life. And I thank you ever so much for your support.